Before we begin, in 2019, YouTube was caught data mining children under the age of 13, violating the Child's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies meant to dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. This video is not made for kids. It is not targeted at kids. It is not advertising to kids. Parental discretion is advised. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Big finish time once again as we look at a new release, Doctor Who, the 12th Doctor Chronicles. Released in February of 2020, directed by Helen Goldwyn. The 12th Doctor Chronicles is a set of 4 audiobooks read by Jacob Dudman. Also featured are Mandy Simons as Mary Seacole, Emily Redpath as Cameron, Ingrid Oliver as Petronella Osgood, and Samuel Anderson as Danny Pink. As always, I will be talking spoilers, although because this is a new release, I will try to avoid them as much as possible, and let you know when I do start getting into some serious spoilers. So, you have been warned, now let's get this out of the way. And the 12th Doctor Chronicles opens with The Charge of the Night Brigade by David Llewellyn. And this story sees the Doctor in the Crimean Peninsula during the Crimean War, where he has to stop an alien invasion with Mary Seacole. And before I forget any further into the stories, I just want to say Jacob Dudman does a fairly decent job reading and narrating them. He has a very dynamic way of reading it, He's not just reading the text, he's putting emotion into the text. When things start getting tense, he knows how to speed up, or he knows how to change his reading speed. He knows what the mood of what he's reading is, and he does help give voices to other characters. Give unique voices to the other characters. Whereas, and really his narration does help a lot of this set. I'll get back to his 12th Doctor in a minute, but whereas, for example, if you get the audiobook Combat Magics, which is a 13th Doctor novel. It's a good novel, don't get me wrong, but Mandip Gill's narration is very flat. The most she does is she reads the tension of the scene. She knows how to channel the mood of the scene in her reading, but otherwise her narration is very flat, and she doesn't give every character their own voice, just as a means of comparison. Now, his 12th Doctor, it isn't perfect. In fact, far from. And really how he reads the 12th Doctor, the voice he gives him, I imagine for most people curious to check this one out, is gonna be their biggest hurdle. But like I've said in the past, I've listened to some of his other 12th Doctor stuff, and it's grown on me. I still don't like it so much, but I am very used to it. In fact, since we're talking about Big Finish, I sort of see it how is similar to how Peter Purves does the First Doctor. What he lacks in vocal likeness, he makes up for in characterization, Like Purves in the First Doctor, Dudman very clearly understands the 12th Doctor. He knows what the character is, and he shows it. And he portrays it really well. It's just the lack of the vocal likeness that is the biggest issue. Excuse me, it's a little warm today. Anyway, with that in mind, this first story, The Charge of the Night Brigade, is very average. In fact, I would say it's painfully average. But once you get past this story, the rest of the set is actually very decent. The pacing is all over the place. It starts off slow, it builds up, it slows down again, and it's just, I feel if the pacing was more consistent, it might have helped the story a little bit, but yeah, as it is, the pacing is very inconsistent. And the characters, aside from the Doctor and Mary Seacole, are all very one-note. You have a pompous Doctor who thinks he's the bee's knees. You have the stiff, upper lip, mustachioed British general. And, there's just no real sense of development for these characters. But, Mary Seacole is an interesting character. And this is a celebrity historical, which, thinking about it now, the 12th Doctor never really had. Robot of Sherwood doesn't count, for a number of reasons. But yeah, if you're unfamiliar with Doctor Who, a celebrity historical is a historical story, be it a pure historical or a pseudo-historical, where one of the major plot points of the story is a famous historical figure. Spyfall, Series 12 has had a ton of them. Spyfall with Ada Lovelace and Nora Nayib Khan, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, The Haunting of Villa Diodati, and there's been others throughout the series, like Time Lash had H.G. Wells. That one wasn't exactly a historical, though. The Shakespeare Code, William Shakespeare. The Unquiet Dead, Charles Dickens. But yeah, no, just thinking on this one, it made me realize that the 12th Doctor era had no celebrity historicals, and now we get one with Mary Seacole. As I said, Mary Seacole was a nurse. Well, I didn't say it. Mary Seacole was a nurse during the Crimean War, and while she tended to the wounded, she basically went behind enemy lines and opened the British Hotel, as she named it, where she took care of British soldiers and gave them a home away from home. And I kind of found this fascinating because it took a figure from history who's only sort of started to gain a form of relevance, a form of popularity, because for the longest time, her accomplishments in history were overshadowed by another figure that was active during the same time. In Seacole's case, that was Florence Nightingale. And the exchange and the dynamic between the Doctor and Seacole is interesting, and it's one of the best parts of the story, but I don't feel it succeeds in what Llewellyn was setting out to do, which is because this is supposed to be the Series 8 12th Doctor, who, according to Matt Fitton, who was the script editor for this, was very spiky. And the idea was to pair him up with Mary Seacole, who also had a reputation for being spiky. The problem is, while it does well for Seacole, it doesn't really show for the 12th Doctor. In fact, because now I know, based on the interviews and the making of, this was supposed to be set during Series 8, that is kind of another weakness of this story. This is not the Series 8 12th Doctor. But yeah, like I said, once you get past just how painfully average this story is, the rest of the set is decent, which brings us to War Wounds by Mark Wright. And this story sees Danny Pink stow away into the TARDIS while the Doctor goes on a random adventure. The Doctor calls it the Potluck Protocols. Basically, long story short, he engages the randomizer and explores wherever he lands. And I was really hopeful for this story because Danny Pink was a character I didn't particularly like, but I could see the potential there, because it felt like, Danny was a soldier, and during his service, he did some questionable things that haunt him. And it felt like during Series 8 that the 12th Doctor wasn't supposed to hate him. He had this weird thing with soldiers that I still don't understand. But it felt like everything the Doctor hated about himself, he sees and projects onto Danny. But we never got that. In fact, really all we got with Danny and the Doctor was a love triangle involving Clara. Let's be honest, that's what it was. It was a freaking love triangle. And I was really hoping this story, because Clara's not in it, for one thing, would improve that dynamic, that relationship between the Doctor and Danny. And it's more of the same. But that aside, this is a decent story. The Doctor and Danny wind up on a planet that is in the middle of a war of some sort. And they are sort of caught up in the crossfire, and they have to help serve this faction. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the war going on, but that is the basic story. And where do I want to go from there? The characters here are a little more interesting. We still have, the leading general who's very devoted to his cause, very strict. But then we also have this doctor who Danny and the doctor are helping, and she's a lot of fun, actually. It's like she's trying to she's here as sort of an envoy for the humans in this war, trying to help set up peace. And she's just kind of jaded and sort of shielding herself. She's kind of jaded and she sort of put up a wall around herself where it feels like she doesn't take this seriously, but she's just sort of jaded about everything. And it really comes out in this scene between the Doctor and this character whose name I'm forgetting, I apologize, where they are trying to tend to wounded, and the Doctor has been conscripted into being a surgeon, and they lose a patient. And there's this really wonderful scene between the Doctor and this character. And despite my initial complaint about, their relationship between being more of the same, Danny is really good in this story, too. Samuel Anderson, actually his performance feels very natural, whereas, because I think this was his first audio, whereas, I talked about the Diary of River Song, Series 1, where Alex Kingston kind of felt a little stiff, like she'd never done audio before. That's not the case with Anderson. He does well enough. And as the story goes on, and we see the relationship between the Doctor and Danny change, it does get better. And I thought an interesting touch is, there is a point where Danny tries to hold off the soldiers so the Doctor can get away. I'm trying not to give away too much of the plot. And as he's standing his ground against these soldiers, he sees the boy he killed in Afghanistan, which, was something brought up in Darkwater. And, and again, it's just so fascinating. It gives us much more characterization to Danny than, the bare bones we got in Series 8. And this story is very decently paced, and it keeps building upon itself well as it progresses to the end point. And I get where they were going with the end point, because at the end, because of circumstances, the Doctor loses his memory of this entire event. Yep, we're dealing with a memory loss story again. And I get what they were going, because the Doctor and Danny finally reached an understanding, and now the Doctor loses his memory of this adventure, so it's supposed to make death in heaven all the more tragic. It doesn't really add anything to it, but War Wounds, at least, again, it starts off slow, but as it goes on, it gets really good. And the third story in this set is Distant Voices by Lisbeth Miles, which sees the Doctor trying to deal with a temporal disturbance with a woman named Cameron, who is a tour guide at a museum. And I think out of all the companions in this set, we have 2 returning companions and 2 new ones, Cameron is one of the best. In this set, because she's a one-off companion. From the beginning, she has a very nice personality. She has an interesting premise to her, which I'll talk about a little bit. And then her story develops really nicely, and her interplay with the 12th Doctor is really good. Like I said, Dudman's vocal likeness for the 12th Doctor isn't great, but his characterization is spot on. And which really helps, because as this story progresses, as all of these stories progress, you really feel the presence of the 12th Doctor. It really helps you, and it really feels like, okay, yeah, this would make sense for this Doctor. And anyway, one of the problems with Cameron is she keeps hearing these voices, and as they're traveling along, as she meets the Doctor, she realizes he hears them too. And what eventually happens is, as Cameron tries to focus on these voices and figure out what they are, her and the Doctor are dragged first to the past and then to the future. The story has a really creative idea for time travel behind it. Basically, Cameron is a soldier from the future who is trying to take out this dictator. The idea was, excuse me, her rebel cell would build a time machine and assassinate this dictator before he came to power and started these events. But his army figured out what they were doing, and as she activated the time machine, they attacked it, which displaced her in 3 different time periods. And the conclusion to this story is good. It does that whole, oh, you're a fixed point in time, but I'm gonna still save you thing that I just never liked. But I think it handles it better than some of the other stories on TV have. Looking at you, Hellbent. And like I said, really the interplay between the Doctor and Cameron is really what puts this story over the top for me, and how Cameron's story ends. And again, just Emily Redpath, who plays Cameron, just her acting is also really good. You know, thinking about, and I'm sort of talking in circles, but I'll get to that when we get to the overview. And that brings us to the final story of this set, Field Trip by Una McCormick. This sees the Doctor pick up Osgood, from UNIT, and take her to a distant planet in the far-off future because he needs her help talking to politicians. Which I think is hilarious, because when he shows up, she gets so excited to be a companion and go on this adventure, and it's like, and the Doctor's basically just like, you're a civil servant. I need you to be a civil servant for me. So basically, the premise of this story is that there is this massive planetary alliance. And, they have all these sorts of rules, and they keep wanting to acquire planets, and there is a planet they are looking to acquire and add to their alliance by not exactly legal means. And so the Doctor and Osgood are trying to figure out who's behind this and stop them. Very straightforward, very standard story, but this story has the benefit of just being really fun, and I really think that's something Una McCormick knows how to do. She knows how to write very fun stories. Again, the interplay between the 12th Doctor and Osgood is great. If I were to wager a guess, I'd say this is set at around Series 9, where the 12th Doctor went really far into exploring his playful side before he really toned himself down and became a combination of his Series 8 and Series 9 characterizations in Series 10. The sonic sunglasses are in this, and they're used sparingly. I understand not everyone likes them, so that's just kind of your warning. But the screwdriver is in this too, so I would be guessing this is set around Series 10. And actually, now that I think about it, yeah, there's not a lot to say about this story. This is the most fun story in the set. It's not as good as the other stories, but again, it makes up for that by just being fun. And yeah, I really can't think of anything more to say to that. If this had come out in the days where I was still wildly collecting Big Finish, I would recommend this one as a download only. But my recommendation of this set is going to depend entirely on how you feel about the 12th Doctor. If you like him, yeah, I recommend checking this set out, because this set really embodies the 12th Doctor's era very well. But yeah, if you weren't the biggest fan of him, or if you downright didn't like him, this set isn't going to change your mind. And as I did say, as far as quality goes, it is a really average set. There's some good points to it, but it's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing phenomenal, certainly. But I think if you get it, and you like the 12th Doctor, you're in for a good time. As far as story rankings go, I'd say The Charge of the Night Brigade is the weakest, and then War Wounds, the Danny story, Field Trip, and Distant Voices was probably the best. But yeah, those were just my thoughts on the 12th Doctor Chronicles. What were yours? Have you heard it? Share your opinions in the comments section below. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. Share the video around as it'll help the channel grow. In the description box below, you'll find the link to my Ko-fi where you can help support the channel. And you'll find the link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time.